The Krellian armada slid out of the void like a school of black sharks, silent and sharp against the star-dusted backdrop of space. They appeared just past Mars, where the red planet hung like a rusted warning sign. No one on Earth saw them coming until it was too late. Their ships were long and smooth, built from a metal that drank light instead of reflecting it. There were hundreds of them, maybe more, drifting in perfect formation as if choreographed by some ancient cold intelligence. To the Krellians, Earth was nothing special, just another wet rock circling a middle-aged star ripe for the taking. They had watched humanity for years through passive sensors, hidden far beyond the edge of the solar system. They saw wars on every continent, pollution choking oceans, cities burning under their own greed. To them, humans were loud, messy, and weak, easy prey. Their commander, Vextor, stood on the bridge of the flagship Dreadmaw, his four eyes fixed on the blue-green marble growing larger in the viewscreen. His skin was the color of dried blood, and his voice came out in low, guttural clicks that his crew understood without translation. He had crushed a dozen worlds like this one. Earth would be no different. With a flick of his clawed hand, he ordered the broadcast. A signal shot across the solar system, punching through every satellite, every radio tower, every smartphone still powered on. It wasn't a message in words, but in raw data, images of burning cities, crumbling monuments, and kneeling humans. The meaning was clear: surrender or die. Within seconds, panic erupted. In New York, Tokyo, Lagos, and Buenos Aires, people ran into the streets screaming, crying, filming the sky with trembling hands. Governments scrambled. Emergency alerts blared from every device. Some world leaders called for prayer. Others called for bunkers. But deep beneath the granite bones of Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado, panic was not on the menu. Colonel Frank Delgado sat in a dimly lit command center, his face lit by the soft green glow of monitors. He was in his late 40s with salt and pepper hair and a calm that came from decades of watching the sky for threats. He didn't flinch when the alien signal hit. He'd expected something like this, maybe not today, maybe not from this direction, but eventually. Humanity had been broadcasting its noise into space for over a century. It was only a matter of time before someone listened and came knocking. Beside him, Lieutenant Lisa Monroe tapped rapidly on a keyboard older than her boots. She was young, barely 30, with sharp eyes and a mind that moved faster than most AI systems. Her fingers danced over keys that controlled orbital defense grids most people thought were just weather satellites. "They're moving in," she said, her voice steady. "Vanguard group breaking formation. Looks like they're heading for Earth's atmosphere." Delgado nodded. "Let them." "They think we're still using chemical rockets," Lisa added almost to herself. "They scanned our old launch sites, our decommissioned bases. They didn't see the new stuff." "Good," Delgado said. "Let them believe the lie." What the Krellians didn't know was that Earth had changed. Not in the way they expected. No giant warships, no planet-sized shields, but in quiet, clever ways. Over the last 20 years, nations had quietly pooled resources under the Global Defense Accord, a treaty signed in secret after a near-miss asteroid scare in 2031. Scientists, engineers, and even video game developers had worked together to turn everyday tech into weapons. Old mining drones from the moon were retrofitted with railgun coils. Weather control satellites now carried focused microwave emitters. Even deep-sea exploration bots were upgraded to launch hypersonic interceptors from ocean trenches. None of it looked like a military fleet. To an outsider, Earth still seemed defenseless. Back in orbit, the first Krellian dropships peeled away from the main fleet. Sleek and needle-thin, they shot toward Earth like falling daggers. Their target, Chicago, a major city, symbolic, loud, perfect for making an example. As they hit the upper atmosphere, plasma trails lit up the night sky over the Midwest. People filmed it thinking it was a meteor shower. Then the city's power grid flickered. Streetlights died. Phones lost signal. That's when fear turned to terror. But in a small control room beneath the ruins of an old NASA tracking station in Houston, Danny Ruiz adjusted his headset and took a deep breath. He wasn't a soldier. He was a high school physics teacher who'd signed up for the Civil Defense Reserve after the Jakarta incident. Now he was in charge of coordinating civilian drone networks across 3 states. His screen showed hundreds of tiny icons, delivery drones, agricultural bots, even hobbyist quadcopters, all linked into a single mesh network. With a few keystrokes, he sent out a silent command. The drones rose from rooftops, barns, and backyards, forming a buzzing cloud over the city. They weren't armed with missiles. They carried signal jammers, EMP pulses, and reflective foil. Their job wasn't to fight, but to confuse. High above, the Krellian dropships suddenly lost lock on their targets. Their sensors filled with noise, false heat signatures, phantom radar returns, chaotic radio chatter in a dozen human languages. One pilot reported seeing 1,000 small objects swarming like angry bees. Another swore the city below had vanished, replaced by a shifting maze of light and sound. They slowed, confused, hovering like predators unsure of their prey. On the Dreadmaw, Vextor frowned. Why do they hesitate? He clicked. There is no resistance. Only noise. His tactical officer, a younger Krellian named Zarn, checked the scans again. No energy weapons. No fighter craft. Only small machines. Like toys. Vextor snorted a wet bubbling sound. Toys cannot stop us. Order the bombardment. But before the command could be sent, something strange happened. From the far side of the moon, a cluster of objects detached from the lunar surface. Long, thin rods made of tungsten and steel, each the size of a telephone pole. They weren't powered. They didn't need to be. Gravity and precision did the work. Accelerated by electromagnetic launchers buried in the moon's crust, they streaked toward Earth at Mach 10, guided by AI that had learned orbital mechanics from old NASA textbooks and open-source physics forums. No one on Earth saw them coming. Not even Delgado knew the exact timing, but he knew they were coming. He glanced at the clock on the wall. 03:13 UTC. 1 minute to go. In Chicago, the alien dropships began to power up their plasma cannons. Below, people huddled in basements, subway tunnels, and parking garages. Some prayed. Some recorded final messages. A little girl clutched a stuffed bear and whispered, "Please don't let them take my dog." Then the sky split open, not with fire, but with silence. The first kinetic rod hit the lead Krellian ship like a hammer on glass. There was no explosion, just a flash of vaporized metal and a shockwave that rippled through the atmosphere. The ship crumpled inward, then shattered into a million pieces. The second rod struck another dropship, then a third. Within seconds, half the invasion force was gone, reduced to glowing debris raining harmlessly into Lake Michigan. On the Dreadmaw, alarms shrieked. Vextor stared at the screen, his 4 eyes wide. What was that?" he demanded. Zarn's voice trembled. "It came from the moon, but the moon has no weapons." Delgado leaned back in his chair. 15 minutes, he said quietly. "That's all we'll need." Lisa looked at him. "You really think so?" He nodded. They came looking for a planet of children. They found a planet of engineers. Outside, the stars watched, and for the first time in centuries, the Krellians felt something they had long forgotten. Fear. The Krellians had spent decades watching Earth from the cold dark beyond Neptune. Their long-range sensors picked up radio chatter, television broadcasts, internet traffic, all of it messy, loud, and full of conflict. They saw humans argue over borders, fight over beliefs, and poison their own air and water. To Vextor and his kind, this was proof of weakness. A species that could not even govern itself would surely crumble under the weight of a real threat. They never saw the quiet work happening in labs, shipyards, and underground facilities across the planet. They missed the way humans turned problems into puzzles and puzzles into solutions. Now, as the first of their dropships turned to dust over Chicago, doubt crept into the Krellian command. Vextor paced the bridge of the Dreadmaw, his claws clicking against the metal floor. "Scan the moon again," he ordered. "Find the weapon." His science officer ran new diagnostics. No launch platforms detected. No energy signatures. The impact came from inert objects. Dense metal rods dropped from lunar orbit. Inert? Vextor hissed. Inert things do not destroy warships. But that was exactly what humans had done. They hadn't built giant cannons or plasma turrets. They had used gravity, math, and old mining tech to turn simple rods into planet-killing hammers. It was cheap, clean, and terrifyingly smart. And it was only the beginning. Back on Earth, the initial panic was fading. People were still scared, but they were also watching. Live feeds from satellites, drones, and even rooftop cameras showed the alien ships breaking apart in the sky. In living rooms from Oslo to Cape Town, families saw something they hadn't expected: their planet fighting back. Not with armies or flags, but with cleverness. A teenager in Mumbai posted a meme showing a cartoon Earth flipping off a spaceship. It got 10 million likes in 10 minutes. In Cheyenne Mountain, Delgado and Lisa monitored the Krellian fleet's movements. The main armada still hovered near Mars, but smaller groups were now peeling off, heading for other targets: New York, London, Shanghai. They were trying again, this time with more caution. But Earth was ready. High above the Pacific, a cluster of old weather satellites, long thought to be useless, suddenly shifted position. Their solar panels unfolded further, not to catch sunlight but to focus it. Using mirrors no bigger than a car door, they bent and concentrated solar energy into narrow beams of white-hot light. These weren't weapons in the traditional sense. They were tools, repurposed. And they worked. As a Krellian scout ship neared the atmosphere over Hawaii, one of those beams lanced out from orbit. It didn't explode. It simply burned a clean hole through the alien hull, like a magnifying glass on an ant. The ship spun wildly, venting air and coolant before tumbling into the ocean. No one on the ground even heard it. Meanwhile, in Geneva, the United Nations Emergency Council convened in a reinforced bunker beneath Lake Geneva. Representatives from every nation were present, but for once no one was arguing. The usual debates about trade, borders, or resources were gone. All that mattered now was survival. Within minutes, they activated the Global Defense Accord, a treaty signed in secret years ago that gave unified command to a joint Earth defense network. No single country was in charge. It was all of them, together. In a small coastal town in Oregon, 15-year-old Maya Lopez stood on her porch with her phone pointed at the sky. She had seen the flashes over Chicago on the news, and now she saw strange lights moving near the horizon. She zoomed in. One of the alien ships was low, maybe damaged. It wobbled like a dying bird. She hit record. "Aliens picked the wrong planet," she whispered, and hit upload. Within an hour, her video had been shared by millions. It wasn't just news, it was hope. But the real fight wasn't happening in cities or skies. It was happening in code, in signals, in the invisible web of data that wrapped the planet. In Houston, Danny Ruiz and his team of civilian volunteers worked nonstop. They weren't soldiers, but they knew drones better than anyone. They sent out new commands. Thousands of small machines, some no bigger than a soda can, rose into the air over major cities. They carried no weapons, only noise. They flooded Krellian sensors with fake signals, false radar returns, ghost heat signatures, digital ghosts of cities that didn't exist. To the aliens, Earth looked like a hall of mirrors, every direction full of traps, every target a lie. Aboard the Dread Maw, Vextor grew furious. Why can we not lock onto their power sources? Their cities glow with energy, yet our targeting fails. Zarn checked the readings again. Their grids are decentralized. No single hub. And their machines. They mimic each other. It is like trying to find one fish in a stormy sea. Vextor slammed a claw on the console. Then burn it all. Fire the gravity disruptors. The Krellians had a weapon that could tear a planet apart. Not with explosions, but by twisting space itself. Their gravity cannons could crush mountains or pull oceans into the sky. But to aim them, they needed stable coordinates. And Earth wasn't giving them any. As the Krellian ships powered up their main weapons, something strange happened deep in the ocean. Off the coast of Japan, near the Mariana Trench, a series of hatches opened on the seafloor. Out rose sleek black drones originally built to map underwater volcanoes. Now they carried hypersonic launch tubes. With silent efficiency, they fired, not missiles but smart projectiles that rode the planet's magnetic field like surfers on a wave. They didn't need fuel. They used Earth itself as a slingshot. One by one, these projectiles struck the underbellies of Krellian ships hovering over the Pacific. The impacts were small but precise, hitting joints, sensor arrays, engine vents. Ships that had crossed light years began to sputter and drift. Their shields flickered. Their comms died. Back in Cheyenne Mountain, Lisa watched the data stream in. "They're losing cohesion," she said. "Their fleet is scattering." Delgado nodded. "Good. Now they're not an army. They're targets." He turned to a junior officer. "Activate Phase 3. Across the planet, hidden systems that no one outside the defense network knew about came online. Old space junk in orbit, derelict satellites, spent rocket stages, suddenly sprouted arms and thrusters. They weren't trash anymore. They were hunters. Guided by AI trained on decades of orbital mechanics and collision data, they moved to intercept any Krellian ship trying to retreat or regroup. Some latched on with magnetic grapples. Others released clouds of smart dust. Nanobots designed to eat through alien alloys molecule by molecule. The Krellians had never seen anything like it. Their enemies weren't warriors in armor. They were teachers, engineers, students, and retirees. People who built things, fixed things, and now defended things. And they did it not with rage, but with calm focus. Vextor finally understood. This wasn't a primitive world. It was a world that had learned to turn everything, even its mistakes, into strength. The pollution they saw? It had driven clean energy breakthroughs. The wars they mocked? They had forced cooperation when survival was at stake. The chaos they dismissed? It was the sound of a billion minds solving problems in real time. He tried to order a full retreat, but it was too late. Earth had already moved faster than he could think, and the clock was still ticking. Only 8 minutes had passed since the first shot. 7 more to go. At 03:14 UTC, Earth stopped waiting and started winning. The response wasn't loud or flashy in the way the Krellians expected. There were no massive explosions lighting up the sky like fireworks. Instead, it was quiet, fast, and everywhere at once. From the moon, the rods kept falling. Simple bars of metal guided by math and momentum, striking Krellian ships with the force of small asteroids. Each impact was clean, precise, and final. The aliens had armor designed to stop plasma bolts and energy beams, not cold, dense tungsten moving at 10 times the speed of sound. Their hulls cracked like eggshells. In orbit, the old satellites continued their work. Mirrors that once studied cloud patterns now focused sunlight into searing beams that cut through alien metal like hot knives through butter. One beam hit a Krellian cruiser near the equator. The ship didn't explode. It just split in half silently, as if the universe had drawn a line and erased everything on one side. Debris tumbled away, burning up in the atmosphere over the Amazon rainforest unnoticed by the animals below. On the ground, cities didn't cower. They fought back in ways no alien mind could predict. In Chicago, Danny Ruiz and his team of civilian volunteers sent out a new wave of drones. These weren't just buzzing distractions anymore. Some carried tiny EMP pulses just strong enough to fry unshielded alien circuits. Others released clouds of reflective chaff, thin strips of metal that scattered radar and blinded targeting systems. The Krellian dropships that had survived the initial strike now floated like confused insects in a storm of noise and light. One pilot tried to land near Lake Michigan, only to find his ship surrounded by hundreds of small machines that clung to its hull and began drilling into weak points with diamond-tipped bits no bigger than a grain of rice. The Krellians had never faced an enemy that used toys as weapons. To them, war was about size, power, and fear. But Earth had learned a different lesson, that small things, when used together, could bring down giants. Deep in the ocean, the drone swarms launched another volley. These weren't just projectiles, they were smart. Each one adjusted its path mid-flight using Earth's magnetic field and real-time data from civilian weather balloons and commercial aircraft. They didn't need engines or fuel. They rode the planet's own forces like surfers on a wave. One struck a Krellian ship hovering over the Pacific. It punched through a coolant vent and released a gel that expanded on contact with air, sealing the ship's internal systems in a hard, rubbery shell. The alien vessel didn't crash. It just froze in place, hanging in the sky like a dead insect on a pin. Aboard the Dreadmaw, Vextor watched his fleet shrink on the view screen. Half his ships were gone. Not destroyed in glorious battle, but disabled, confused, or quietly dismantled by things that looked like junk. He turned to Zarn, his voice low and sharp. How can they do this without a navy? Without a central command? Zarn's claws trembled as he pulled up new data. They don't have one central system. Their defense is everywhere. In their cities, their oceans, their orbit. Even their machines talk to each other without orders. It is like the whole planet is awake. Vextor had no answer. He had studied human history. He knew they built empires, then tore them down. He saw their art, their music, their cruelty. But he never saw their patience, their ability to turn failure into fuel. The oil spills had led to ocean cleaning bots. The space junk crisis had birthed orbital recyclers that now hunted alien ships. Even their video games, endless simulations of war and strategy, had trained a generation to think in networks, not lines. Back in Cheyenne Mountain, Delgado watched the battle unfold on a wall of screens. His face was calm, but his heart pounded. This was the moment they had trained for, planned for, hoped they would never see. Lisa stood beside him, Her eyes locked on a feed from a drone near New York. "They're trying to regroup over the Atlantic," she said. "Forming a defensive ring." "Let them," Delgado replied. "Phase 4 is ready." Across the planet, a new system activated, buried beneath the ice of Antarctica, inside old missile silos in Nebraska, and even in repurposed subway tunnels under Berlin. Massive electromagnets hummed to life. They weren't weapons. They were part of Earth's new planetary shield, a network designed not to block attacks but to bend them. Using carefully tuned magnetic pulses, they distorted local gravity fields just enough to throw off Krellian targeting. A plasma bolt aimed at London curved harmlessly into the North Sea. A gravity wave meant to crush Tokyo dissipated over empty ocean. The Krellians fired again and again, but their shots kept missing. Not by much, just enough. It was as if Earth itself was dodging. In Houston, Danny Ruiz got a message from a retired aerospace engineer in Florida. The man had spent 40 years designing satellite thrusters. Now he'd written a new algorithm that could hijack Krellian navigation signals using old GPS frequencies. Danny uploaded it with one click. Within seconds, 3 Krellian ships veered off course and collided mid-air over the Gulf of Mexico. No explosion, just a silent tangle of black metal falling into the waves. People on the ground watched in awe. In a village in Kenya, children pointed at the sky as alien ships tumbled like broken toys. In Sydney, a news anchor stopped reading her script and just stared out the window as a beam of light sliced a warship in half. No one panicked anymore. They were witnessing something historic. Not just a battle, but a statement. Earth was not for sale, not for conquest, not for harvest. On the Dreadmaw, Vextor finally understood the truth. Humans weren't weak because they fought among themselves. They were strong because they kept building anyway. While his people relied on ancient war doctrines and rigid hierarchies, humans adapted. They shared. They copied. They improved. A kid in Brazil could design a drone controller that ended up in Oregon. A scientist in Seoul could solve a power problem that helped a defense grid in Cairo. It wasn't one mind. It was millions, all working toward the same goal without even knowing each other's names. He tried to send a retreat order, but his comms were jammed, not by a military signal but by a global outpouring of human noise. Millions of phones, radios, and internet devices were broadcasting at once. Music, voices, static, laughter. It was chaos, but it was also a wall. The Krellians couldn't hear their own commands over the sound of a living world refusing to be silenced. Delgado checked the clock. 3:20 UTC, 6 minutes in. 9 to go. He leaned back and said quietly, "Now they see us." And for the first time, the aliens weren't the hunters. They were the prey. By 03:22 UTC, the Krellian fleet was unraveling. What had begun as a proud armada now looked like a swarm of wounded insects, drifting in confusion through Earth's orbit. Their gravity weapons, once feared across 3 star systems, misfired and backfired, caught in feedback loops created by Earth's magnetosphere manipulators, devices originally built to protect satellites from solar flares. Now those same tools twisted the Krellians' own power against them. Ships that fired their cannons found their engines overloading, their shields collapsing inward, their very metal groaning under unnatural stress. Dropships that tried to land met worse fates. Over Chicago, a Krellian vessel descended through the smoke and cloud, its plasma cannons glowing red. But before it could fire, a swarm of civilian drones, modified delivery bots from a local tech startup, flew into its path. They didn't explode. Instead, they released a fine mist of conductive nanoparticles. The particles clung to the alien hull, creating short circuits in every exposed system. Lights flickered. Thrusters sputtered. The ship tilted, then fell like a stone into Lake Michigan, where waiting deep-sea drones wrapped it in polymer nets and dragged it to the bottom for study. In orbit, the real slaughter had begun, not with fire but with patience. The nano-drones, once designed to clean up space junk, now clung to Krellian hulls like metallic mold. They didn't blast or burn. They disassembled. Atom by atom, they peeled back armor, severed wiring, and clogged engine nozzles with microscopic precision. A Krellian engineer watching a live feed from a damaged scout ship saw his own vessel slowly turn to dust before his eyes, as if time itself had sped up just for him. He screamed, but no one heard him over the rising static of Earth's global noise barrage. Back on the ground, people were no longer hiding. They were watching, recording, even cheering. In a small town in Oregon, Maya Lopez's video had become a global symbol. Strangers shared it with messages like "Welcome to Earth" and "Try us again." In Tokyo, office workers gathered on rooftops with binoculars, tracking falling debris like it was a meteor shower. In Rio, street musicians played impromptu concerts as alien ships burned up in the atmosphere, their light painting the sky in strange colors. But the true power of Earth's defense wasn't in its weapons. It was in its unity. For the first time in human history, every nation stood together without a single argument. The Global Defense Accord had activated emergency protocols that overrode all borders. Military bases in Russia shared targeting data with drone hubs in South Africa. Power grids in Canada rerouted energy to support defense lasers in Australia. Even rival tech companies merged their networks, pooling AI resources to predict Krellian movements seconds before they happened. In Cheyenne Mountain, Delgado watched as the last of the Krellian vanguard broke apart over the Atlantic. "They're trying to form a shield around the flagship," Lisa said, her voice tight with focus. "Linking their remaining ships into a defensive sphere." "Good," Delgado replied. "That makes them a single target," he gave a quiet order. Deep beneath the surface of the moon, the final set of kinetic rods launched. Not one or two, but dozens. They streaked toward Earth not in a line, but in a spiral pattern, timed to hit the Krellian cluster from all angles at once. The aliens saw them coming, but they couldn't move. Their linked formation, meant to protect the Dreadmaw, now trapped them like fish in a net. The impacts came in rapid succession. One rod punched through a scout ship. Another shattered a command frigate. A third struck the Dreadmaw's primary sensor array, blinding Vextor just as he tried to order a jump to subspace. The flagship shuddered, its engines failing as debris from its own fleet rained down on its hull. On the bridge, alarms wailed in Krellian tongues. Sarn stared at his console in horror. "Our jump drive is offline. Shields at 12%. We cannot hold." Vextor didn't answer. He was watching the main screen where a new threat appeared. Not from space, but from Earth itself. Rising from the Pacific, a massive structure unfolded like a flower blooming in reverse. It was the Oceanic Defense Spire, a project so secret even most governments didn't know it existed. Built over a decade on the seafloor near Hawaii, it combined deep-sea geothermal power with orbital mirror tech to create a single, sustained beam of coherent light. It wasn't meant to destroy. It was meant to disable, and it was aimed right at the Dreadmaw's core. The beam fired, not with a bang, but with a hum that vibrated through the ocean and into the bones of every living thing nearby. It struck the Krellian flagship not with heat, but with resonance, tuned to the exact frequency of their power core's containment field. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the core destabilized. Not exploded, just shut down, like a light switch flipped by an invisible hand. The Dreadmaw went dark. Across the fleet, other ships followed. One by one, their lights died. Their engines stopped. Their weapons fell silent. The Krellians weren't being killed. They were being turned off. In Houston, Danny Ruiz let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. His drone network showed every alien ship now drifting, powerless, in Earth's orbit. "They're done," he whispered. Around the world, people began to realize it too. The sky was clearing. The flashes had stopped. The alien hum that had filled radios for the last 10 minutes faded into silence. In Geneva, the UN Emergency Council received confirmation. No active threats remained. The battle was over, but Earth wasn't celebrating yet. Not fully, because the real test was coming. What to do with the survivors? Delgado stood up and walked to the main comm station. "Send a message to all Krellian vessels," he said. "In their language. Tell them to power down all systems, seal their weapons, and await instructions. If they comply, they live. If they resist, well, they've seen what we can do." Lisa typed the message, her fingers steady. It was broadcast on every frequency, wrapped in a carrier wave that even damaged ships could receive. Within minutes, emergency beacons blinked to life across the silent fleet. Surrender signals, one after another like stars turning on in reverse. Vextor sat alone on his darkened bridge, his 4 eyes reflecting the dying glow of his ship's last console. He had come to enslave a world. Instead, he had been outthought, outbuilt, and outweighted by a species he thought was beneath notice. He pressed a claw to the surrender key. The Dreadmaw sent its signal. On Earth, clocks ticked past 0327 UTC 13 minutes in. 2 to go, and the planet held its breath, not in fear but in quiet triumph. At 0329 UTC, the last Krellian ship powered down. Its emergency beacon blinked a steady red pulse against the black. Surrender, not defiance. Across Earth's orbit, over 200 alien vessels now floated like dead leaves on a calm sea. Their weapons cold, their engines silent, their crews waiting. The battle had lasted exactly 15 minutes. No cities were destroyed. No armies marched. No nukes were fired. Just quiet, clever work by a planet that had spent centuries learning how to fix things, and now knew how to defend them too. In Cheyenne Mountain, Colonel Frank Delgado exhaled slowly. He didn't cheer. He didn't smile. He just nodded and said, "Secure the perimeter. Prepare for boarding teams." Around him, officers moved with calm efficiency. The real work was just beginning, securing prisoners, studying alien tech, making sure this never happened again. But for now, Earth was safe. Aboard the International Space Station, now retrofitted as a command and detention hub, Captain Helen Briggs floated in the newly reinforced observation module. She wasn't a career soldier. She'd been a lead engineer on the Mars Habitat project before the Accord pulled her into defense coordination. Now she was the first human the Krellians would meet face to face. Through the thick glass, she watched the Dreadmaw drift closer, guided by tether drones. Its once proud hull was scarred by kinetic impacts and scorched by solar beams. It looked less like a warship and more like a broken promise. Inside, Vexator waited. He had removed his command gauntlets. His posture was stiff but not proud. He had expected death or slavery. Instead, humans were sending someone to talk. When the airlock cycled and Helen stepped through in a simple gray jumpsuit, no armor, no weapon, he was confused. "You are their leader?" he asked through a translator patch on his wrist. Helen shook her head. "No, I'm just the one who knows how your power core works." She pointed to a schematic on her tablet. "We shut it down cleanly. We can restart it too if you cooperate." Vexator stared. "You disabled our core without destroying it?" "We don't waste things," she said. "Not energy, not metal, not lives. Even yours." On Earth, life returned to something like normal, but not quite. People walked outside again. Cars moved through streets, but everyone carried a new awareness. The sky wasn't just empty space anymore. It was a place Earth now guarded. In schools, teachers paused lessons to explain what had happened. Not with fear, but with pride. "We didn't win with guns," one teacher in Nairobi told her class. "We won with brains." In Houston, Danny Ruiz got a call from his old physics students. They'd built a model of the battle using drone footage and open-source data. They wanted to know if they got the orbital mechanics right. He smiled and said, "Almost. Try adjusting for lunar gravity drag." It felt strange. Just hours ago, they were fighting for survival. Now they were back to homework. In Oregon, Maya Lopez's phone buzzed nonstop. News outlets wanted interviews. Scientists asked for her raw footage. A toy company offered to make an action figure of her. She turned them all down. Instead, she uploaded a new video. Just her dog barking at a falling piece of alien debris that landed in their backyard. The caption read, "Still here. Still barking." But the biggest change wasn't on Earth, it was out there, far beyond the solar system in hidden outposts and silent observatories. Other species watched the transmission. The Krellians had ruled a wide arc of the galaxy through fear. Their name alone made weaker races tremble. Now, their entire invasion fleet had been stopped in 15 minutes by a world that hadn't even bothered to build a proper navy. Alien scholars rewrote their records. Earth was no longer listed as pre-warp or non-threatening. In the galactic database, a new tag appeared beside its name. "Do not engage." Some species sent quiet signals of respect. Others simply erased Earth from their exploration routes. One ancient race, the Velnari, who had watched humanity for generations, finally broke their silence. They sent a single message on a frequency only Earth's deep space arrays could detect. "You passed the test." Back in orbit, Helen finished her inspection of the Dreadmaw. She found no hidden weapons, no traps, just scared beings who had learned too late that intelligence wasn't measured by how loud you shouted, but by how well you listened. She left Vexator with a data pad showing Earth's terms. Disarm, share peaceful knowledge, and never return with hostile intent. In exchange, they would be fed, healed, and eventually sent home, on human-built ships if needed. Vextor studied the terms for a long time. Then he looked up. Why show mercy? Helen shrugged. Because we remember what it's like to be afraid. And because winning isn't just about beating someone. It's about showing them a better way. Down on Earth, Delgado stood outside Cheyenne Mountain as dawn broke over the Rockies. The sky was clear, pink and gold. No smoke, no fire. Just a new day. Lisa joined him, holding 2 cups of coffee. What now? She asked. Now, he said, we rebuild. Not just defenses, trust, cooperation. We showed the galaxy what we can do. Now we have to show ourselves. In cities and villages, people gathered not in fear but in quiet celebration. No parades. No speeches. Just neighbors sharing food, kids drawing pictures of Earth with a shield around it, and old men nodding like they'd known all along that humanity would rise when it mattered. The Krellians would stay in orbit for weeks, then months, as agreements were signed and ships were stripped of weapons. But the message was already spreading across the stars. Earth was not a prize to be taken. It was a home to be respected. And from that day on, every child knew one simple truth. When the universe knocks, humanity answers fast, smart, and without mercy. But also with grace.